Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to March Mystery Madness. This is a big BookTube event that's taking place. I'm sure you've seen it in your subscription queue. It's a whole bunch of great booktubers talking about murder mysteries for the whole month of March. All the different subgenres, all the different flavors, favorite authors, people have been interviewed. It's been wonderful, absolutely wonderful. It is every year. And I've been doing a little side event on my own, a little read-along, a series of mini read-alongs with David Murphy, a booktuber of a financial bent who had been gone from BookTube for a while, and he was kind of thinking about putting his toe back in the waters of our freakish little island of misfit toys. We decided to do read-alongs one a week in the month of March of 4 canonical murder mysteries. So we did The Hound of the Baskervilles. We did The Body in the Library by Agatha Christie. We did The Daughter of Time by Josephine Tey. That was last week. And today we're finishing up with Gaudy Night by Dorothy Sayers. And a number of you emailed me. I've been getting lots of emails about David Murphy over the month of March. First, people saying, a lot of you, of course, are new to this little corner booktube and had not ever seen any of his videos, and you're saying, who is this guy? Who is this kid who doesn't like The Hound of the Baskervilles? What on earth? What are you subjecting us to? And I went to bat. Said, well, no, he's raising serious issues. These are important things. The Hound of the Baskervilles doesn't apply to everybody. And then the following week, he slapped around the octogenarian Miss Marple in The Body in the Library, and the emails recommenced. What are you going to do? You can't pick your friends. Oh, wait, you can. And then last week, the emails commenced again, but for a different reason, because some of you fell under David Murphy's rather dubious charms and wanted to know where he was for the read-along last week. He didn't post a video for The Daughter of Time by Josephine Tey. And there were 2 reasons for that. I suspect there were 2 reasons for that. One was a rather raucous night on the town that David and his fellows had. He lives in, like, northwestern Manitoba, or one of those godforsaken northern provinces where it's winter 11 months out of the year and the state animal is beer. So, you know, they take their raucous nights out when they can get them. And the mere description of it would have stood several hairs on end like quills upon the fretful porpentine. It was horrifying. I had a bit of liver sclerosis just reading the email. And that was one of the reasons. The other reason was, if we think about The Daughter of Time, it's a novel in which, at the very least, one brother dreams of poisoning his annoying other brother. And if you were David Murphy and you had his brother, that might be a little on the touchy side. It might work your one good nerve. So I'm thinking it's a combination of those 2 that made us not hear from him. I'm hoping that we hear from him about this book, mainly because I feel a little bit guilty. I mean, The Hound of the Baskervilles, you either like Arthur Conan, you either get used to his prose style or you don't. And you either get used to Sherlock Holmes as a character or you don't. And if you have reservations about Holmes as a character, The Hound of the Baskervilles is going to exacerbate them in the extreme. It was meant to do that because those very qualities that might irritate you made the bulk of the London reading public fall in love with Holmes as a character, and that was Doyle's reason for writing that book, was to win them back. And The Body in the Library, I mean, David's criticisms were, the main criticism seemed to strike a nerve with the rest of you, is that Miss Marple is not all that likable. Well, I said the same thing in my video. The only reason you didn't come after me is because I'm a super sexy 20-something major influencer. That's capital M and capital I. I'm a major influencer. Okay? But in The Body in the Library, Miss Marple is not all that likable. She's a snob. And a cold-blooded one at that. And The Daughter of Time, I mostly ranted about it, although I think it had higher literary quality on kind of an impersonal Murphy-esque scale than either The Body in the Library or The Hound of the Baskervilles. So on that level, I would have been interested to hear what David had to say about it. And if that was true for The Daughter of Time, it's infinitely more true for this book. This is Dorothy Sayers' masterpiece, in my humble opinion. And you don't have to be even 5 pages into this book before you realize that something very much different is going on than was going on in the 3 other books that we read in these read-alongs. They're very enjoyable, I think. in their own way, they're all very enjoyable. And so is this one. But this is not a murder mystery. This is a novel in which a mystery takes place. This is the 21st century has made me leery about any of these terms, so I take them with a grain of salt. But this is a much, much more serious author, and a much more elevated level of prose. Much more elevated. This is a gorgeous book, beautiful, ruminative. I was more impressed with it this time, even than all the other times that I read it. This came out in the mid-1930s, first in the UK and then in the United States. And I don't know. Well, we'll get to that. The story is about Harriet Vane, who's appeared in a couple of other... The main protagonist is Lord Peter Wimsey, who is started out as Dorothy Sayers' sort of toffish, aristocratic amateur detective, and became beloved by her readers, and deepened as a character as a result. Soon after he was introduced, Harriet Vane, a murder mystery writer, started to appear in these books. And her previous appearance, she was on trial for the murder of her husband, for which she was innocent, I should point out. And in this book, Harriet Vane goes back to her college, her old college, which Dorothy Sayers modeled after her own college at Oxford, for a Gaudy night, for a sort of a reconvocation of graduates, for a get-together, some noshing, lots of good food, a couple of speeches, that sort of thing. And Harriet Vane has no idea what she's stepping into. She has no idea what her reception will be. She's a successful murder mystery novelist who has stood trial in a sensational murder investigation in which she was the primary suspect. So, you know, going back to the hallowed halls of her old school, she could easily imagine being cut. That was the 1950s expression, getting the cold shoulder, having people sort of squint at her as a disreputable figure, as a figure who has brought disrepute upon the school. And that doesn't happen at first, as this book starts. That doesn't happen. Instead, she is introduced to a barrage of old classmates, new people, and we are introduced to them as well. And she's also reintroduced to the beautiful, placid air of her college, with its quiet quadrangle and its old stone buildings and whatnot. And I want to read you a bit of that, because immediately Harriet Vane is nostalgic. Even though she likes her life the way it is, she's immediately nostalgic. If only one could come back to this quiet place, where only intellectual achievements counted. If one could work here steadily and obscurely at some close-knit piece of reasoning, undistracted and uncorrupted by agents, contracts, publishers, blurb writers, interviewers, fan mail, autograph hunters, notoriety hunters, and competitors. Abolishing personal contacts, personal spites, personal jealousies, getting one's teeth into some dull and durable thing, maturing it into solidity like the Shrewsbury beeches, then one night being able to forget the wreck and chaos of the past, or see it, at any rate, in a truer proportion. Because in a sense, it was not important. The fact that one had loved and sinned and suffered and escaped death was far less of ultimate moment than a single footnote in a dim academic journal establishing the priority of a manuscript or restoring a lost iota subscript. It was the hand-to-hand struggle with this insistent personality of other people, all pushing for a place in the limelight, that made the accidents of one's own personal adventure bulk so large in the scheme of things. I realize that we live in a post-literate age of a universal relativism, but that's excellent. Far better than any of the prose that we have encountered in the three other books that we have read, however much I love them. I love the three other books that we have read, David Murphy notwithstanding, but I didn't encounter anything in those books that approaches that. And the same thing is true for the descriptions of some of those academics. I'll read you one of those. It's just beautifully done. It's just, Harriet Vane is introduced to a forbidding historian figure, but she's also reintroduced to her old scholar, her old sort of headmistress, Miss Lidgett. Miss Lidgett's manner was exactly what it had always been. To the innocent and candid eyes of that great scholar, no moral problem seemed ever to present itself. Of a scrupulous personal integrity, she embraced the irregularities of other people in a wide, unquestioning charity. As any student of literature must, she knew all the sins of the world by name, but it was doubtful whether she recognized them when she met them in real life. It was as though a misdemeanor committed by a person she knew was disarmed and disinfected by the contact. So many young people had passed through her hands, and she had found so much good in all of them, it was impossible to think they could be deliberately wicked, like Richard III or Iago. Unhappy, yes. Misguided, yes. Exposed to difficult and complicated temptations which Miss Lidgett herself had been mercifully spared, yes. If she heard of a theft or divorce, even worse things, she would knit her brows and think how utterly wretched the offender must have been that they could have done such a dreadful thing. Little portraits like that are the reason why this is, I believe, the longest Peter Wimsey novel that Dorothy Sayers ever wrote, because they fill this book with a play of personalities. This is a huge play of personalities, and it isn't long after Harriet Vane is at her old college that things start to happen. Obscene messages, obscene graffiti, threats, even an assault. No murder. And that is one of the distinguishing features that I mentioned in my last couple of videos, that each of these great murder mysteries that I picked for March has a distinguishing feature. With The Hound of the Baskervilles, the distinguishing feature is that it's entirely possible to construct a completely viable alternate theory of the crime. The only reason that we think everything is all tied up with a neat little satin bow at the end is because Sherlock Holmes says it is. But it's entirely possible to come up with a version of the crime that's completely different from the one in the book. That's odd. And most mystery writers don't let that happen. With The Body in the Library, it's the same thing. With The Body in the Library, the other strange thing, in addition to the cold-bloodedness, the murders in Body in the Library don't really matter, which is, again, kind of odd, unless it's a police procedural where every murder has to matter. But with The Body in the Library, the distinctive thing is the switcheroo. There are a couple of dipsy doodles at the end that Agatha Christie does that I think she does quite well, and that she doesn't typically reproduce in other books. And then in The Daughter of Time, the distinguishing feature for The Daughter of Time is that there's no corpus delicti. There's no actual... It's a historical mystery that's being solved. Entirely a historical mystery that's being solved. Not like in Daughter of Time-esque murder mysteries that might happen in later years after the publication of that book, where in addition to solving a historical murder mystery, the main sleuth is also solving a contemporary murder that looks connected somehow to ancient history. That is universally the rule now. But Josephine Tay sets her book entirely in the past. The character is in the present day, but he is only solving a murder mystery that happened hundreds of years ago. And that's kind of unusual. That doesn't often happen. And Gaudy Night is a perfect example of perhaps the most unusual narrative gimmick in all of popular mystery fiction, which is that there's no murder. There's no dead body. There is a culprit. Someone is doing these things. And eventually, Peter Wimsey is brought in, and to not only to the mysteries, but see, I reflexively want to say it, but there's no murder. Peter Wimsey is eventually brought in. This is not just a Harriet Vane novel. He's eventually brought in. And there are a bunch of other supporting characters that are wonderfully done. And there's a romantic tension between Peter Wimsey and Harriet Vane that we have noticed in previous books. And we're wondering if it's just going to continue to go on forever, but there's a wonderful resolution to it at the end of this book. In fact, the resolution here is wonderful just in general. There's the big reveal scene has been lauded by mystery fans as just remarkably well done. Not particularly believable. Those big reveal scenes never are, but where Hercule Poirot says, it was you, Monsieur Green. We don't believe it. We don't believe it. Well, who would sit there for it? Why wouldn't they leave? Or brain him with a candlestick, one way or another. Nevertheless, it's a beautiful piece of writing. Almost makes you dizzy to read it. And it goes on for a bravura length of time. It is that particular scene. There are a number of scenes like that, but that particular scene is done by an author who is simply saying to her readers, this is my show. And I'm in complete control, and I'm doing it well. So don't complain about how long this scene is. And I would never dream of doing that. This book produced mixed critical appraisals, to put it mildly. The two most famous, I mean, people have reviewed this for a million different ways, but the two most famous names are the snooty pants intellectual Jacques Barzun, who's actually on my books and criticism bookshelf, low down, because I don't consult him as often as I consult Elizabeth Hardwick. But he loved Gaudy Night. He was when he wasn't doing highfalutin literary criticism, he gobbled down murder mysteries, and he recognized right away that this book was special. Even in Dorothy Sayers' oeuvre, it was special, that it's incredibly eloquent, incredibly moving on a personal level. Unfortunately, the other high-profile voice responding to this book was George Orwell, who didn't like it, who thought it was dumb, thought if you take away the mystery, and you immediately see it undressed as an average or lower than average novel. I don't know what he was thinking when he said that. He never wrote prose this beautiful. But one way or another, I think there was another response to this book that I believe is far more popular, far better known than either Jacques Barzun or George Orwell. And I believe that response is Brideshead Revisited. I believe that Evelyn Waugh read this book hot off the presses. I'd be willing to bet that he read it in a single sitting. And I'd be willing to bet that it worked on him, especially those plangent notes, those nostalgic, gorgeous notes about Oxford as some sort of lost Eden, some place that was brutal and horrific and nerve-wracking when you were there. But when you look back on it, it has all the... Well, it looks like a city of aquatint, to use a phrase from Brideshead Revisited. The opening scenes of Brideshead Revisited that take place in Charles Ryder's Oxford, I think they owe a lot to this book, which came out 10 years before. I think they owe a lot to that. I don't think it would have crossed Waugh's mind to write those segments in the way that he did, in the particular register that he did, if he hadn't read and loved this book. I've had this theory for a while. I've never actually cross-referenced it. I imagine it'd be easy enough to prove or disprove. I mean, there's a big volume of Waugh's letters, and I have a 2-volume biography of the man. I could check and try and run it down, although it seems to me that if I'm right, it's the kind of thing he would probably hide. One way or another, that sensibility is evoked here. People are laid out on tables, and they're so gorgeously described that you almost lose sight of the fact that they are also being mercilessly described. That description that I gave you of Miss Lidgett is a perfect example. It's beautifully written so that you could almost miss the fact that it is a sweeping condemnation of her as a person. It makes her worse than naive. And that happens all throughout here. I loved rereading it. I'm not sure what David's going to make of it. I'm hoping at least that he notices the elevated prose. But he might think that the ROI for a long murder mystery that has no murder in it is not sufficient. He might, who knows? He might think that it's a little bloodless. I don't know. Maybe he's not cut out for murder mysteries. But as far as I'm concerned, if you read these 4 murder mysteries, The Hound of the Baskervilles, The Body in the Library, The Daughter of Time, and Gaudy Night, and you don't like any of them, then you're not cut out for murder mysteries. I don't know what would work if those didn't. Maybe hard-bitten police procedurals. Maybe we'll do 4 of those next year. But maybe he liked it. Who knows? We'll see if he's recovered. And, the way things are in Northwest, Elkjaw, Manitoba, or wherever the hell he is, where it's still snowing actively every day. It could be that in the interval of living through the purgatory of living there, he's probably gone and had another night out. So who knows? We'll get a video. One way or another, this has been a joy for me to do these quick little read-alongs of these sorts of things, to such a point that I was actually contemplating doing another quartet for April. So if you feel like it, feel free to sound off in the comments. Is there a BookTube event in April that I could do 4 quick read-alongs for? And if there is one that would suit that, then maybe I could make, if there is one and I learn about it and I want to do it, then maybe I could make a reading schedule and put it up tomorrow. If there is such a one, are any of you interested in joining me? It's possible that David Murphy will not be, although if he and I will do, if he's up for it, we'll do a read-along all through the month of April. The one hypothesis about his Manitoba Nights Out that I'm not entertaining is that this read-along is what drove him to it. And I'm leaving out that hypothesis because I don't want any of you to worry if you get into a read along with me that you will be driven to drink. So let's talk about that. David and I had a tentative idea for a read along in April. I love the idea. If he's willing to do it, I am absolutely willing to do it. But there might be others. What are booktube events that we could latch onto? Is there? Do you want to get involved? It can't be a slow reader. It can't be a slow reader. I know a lot of you are slow readers, self-professed, and I think that's absolutely adorable. But it can't be. If we're going to do a book a week, it can't be that. So, propose accordingly. but feel free to sound off. So that is the end of our March Mystery Madness read along of 4 canonical murder mysteries. It was a ton of fun for me, especially Gaudy Night. That was a real joy to reread. So I'm going to wrap this up for now. That is our mystery proceedings for the day. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.